I always thought silence protected me. If I stayed quiet enough, invisible enough, maybe my family would stop seeing me as a mistake. But that morning, silence wasn't enough. Our house felt colder than usual, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the shouting. "Clarissa, open this door." Father's voice thundered from the hallway. "You can't back out now." Inside her locked room, my sister was sobbing dramatically. "I won't do it, Father. I won't marry a freak." I sat on the staircase, my hands gripping the banister. Every word echoed through the marble floors, every insult bouncing straight into my chest. Clarissa had always been the golden one, the daughter everyone wanted, the face of our family business, the beautiful Harper who could do no wrong. Me, I was just Eli, the quiet one, the afterthought. And now, because she refused to marry the CEO of Cross Enterprises, our entire family was about to go bankrupt. Mother rushed past me, her perfume too strong, her voice sharp. "You don't understand, Clarissa. If we back out now, we lose the investment. We lose everything." "I don't care," my sister screamed from behind the door. "I heard he's disfigured. He doesn't even show his face. He's a monster, not a husband." The sound of something breaking followed. Maybe a vase, maybe my parents' last shred of hope. I stood up quietly. "Maybe I should go," I said. Mother turned to me, horrified. "Eli, don't be ridiculous." "Why not?" I said softly. The contract only said a Hale child would marry him. It never said which one. Father spun around, his face red and lined with exhaustion. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do," I said. "You need someone." "I'm someone." Clarissa's door flew open then. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice dripped venom. "Oh please. As if anyone would want you." I looked her straight in the eye. For once, I didn't look away. Maybe not, but at least I don't run from promises. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult she'd ever thrown. That afternoon, I went to Cross Enterprises. The city passed by like a dream. Glass towers, flashing lights, and a sky heavy with rain. I'd never been to the Cross building before, but everyone knew it. A tall structure of black glass, cold and elegant, like the man who owned it. No one had ever seen Damian Cross in person. He never attended parties, never took interviews, never appeared in photographs. He was a rumor, a shadow with power. Some said he'd been scarred in an accident. Others said he hid from the world because of his cruelty. All I knew was that my sister was terrified of him. And I, maybe foolishly, was curious. The receptionist led me to the top floor. My reflection followed me in the mirrored elevator. Brown eyes, tired but steady, soft hair tucked behind my ears, a suit slightly too big on my shoulders. When the elevator opened, I stepped into silence. The office was vast and dimly lit. Heavy curtains filtered the light, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and expensive wood. At the far end, a man stood with his back to me, staring out the window. "Mr. Cross," I said. He didn't move at first. His voice, when it came, was deep and even. "You're not the one I expected." "So, they sent the substitute." My pulse jumped. "I came willingly." He turned around slowly. And in that moment, I understood why the world called him the invisible CEO. He wasn't monstrous. He wasn't ugly. He was human, tall, broad-shouldered, and devastatingly composed. The left side of his face carried a long, pale scar that disappeared beneath his collar, but it didn't make him less handsome. It just made him colder. His dark eyes were unreadable, but sharp enough to slice through pretenses. "Eli Hale," he said, his gaze traveling over me. "You're not the one from the photographs." "No," I said evenly. My sister refused. His jaw tightened. Typical. That single word carried more meaning than an entire conversation. I stepped forward. "The deal your company made with my family still stands. I'm here to fulfill it." He studied me like a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. "Do you even understand what that means?" "I understand that my family needs this partnership. And you? I need a reason to stop being everyone's afterthought." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes, curiosity maybe. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Sit." For the next hour, we went over the contract. It was written in the kind of cold legal language that made love sound like a business transaction. Duration, 12 months minimum. Clause, either party may dissolve the marriage after the term, provided both agree. Purpose, to uphold the partnership between Harper Industries and Cross Enterprises. When I reached the final page, my hand hesitated. He noticed. "You can still walk away," Damian said. "No one's forcing you." I looked up at him. "Aren't they?" He didn't answer. I picked up the pen and signed my name. We met again the next day at the courthouse. No reporters, no photographers, no family. Just a judge, 2 signatures, and a pair of gold rings that gleamed like tiny handcuffs. Damian didn't look at me when he said, "I do," but I looked straight at him. Because for me, it wasn't surrender. It was choice. After the ceremony, we rode in silence to his estate. The mansion stood on the city's edge, old and towering, half swallowed by mist. Inside, the air was quiet and perfectly arranged, like everything had its place except warmth. "This is your room," he said finally, opening a door at the far end of the hall. "Thank you," I said softly. He nodded, turning to leave. "Dinner is at 7. I don't tolerate lateness. And one more thing." He paused at the doorway, eyes shadowed. "Don't go into the west wing." Then he left. I stood there, staring at the door long after it closed. I should have been scared, or regretful. But instead, I felt something else, a strange burning calm. Everyone thought I'd been forced into this. But deep down, I knew the truth. This was the first time I'd chosen anything for myself. And I wasn't planning to run. The first night in Damian's mansion felt like sleeping inside a stranger's heartbeat. Quiet, steady, but distant. The house was too big for silence. Every tick of the clock echoed down marble halls. Even the air felt expensive, polished and cold. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the gold ring on my finger. It gleamed under the lamp like a secret. Married, to a man who barely looked at me. Most people would have been heartbroken. I wasn't, because I hadn't married for love. I'd married for survival. Still, that didn't mean I planned to vanish into the background again. At 7 sharp, I went downstairs. The dining hall was huge, a long table that could feed 20 people, but only 2 seats were occupied. Damian was already there, dressed in a black suit, a newspaper folded neatly beside his plate. He didn't look up when I entered. "Sit," he said simply. I obeyed. A maid placed a cup of coffee before me, her hands shaking slightly. Damian's presence did that. It made everyone careful, as though even breathing too loudly would offend him. He finally glanced at me. "You're early," he said. "I thought you didn't tolerate lateness," I replied. That earned me a faint lift of his brow. "You remember instructions well." "I was raised to." He sipped his coffee. "Then your parents did something right." I smiled lightly. "You didn't see the full report card." For a split second, the corner of his mouth twitched, almost like a smirk, but gone before it fully appeared. We ate mostly in silence. But silence with Damian wasn't peaceful. It was sharp, filled with unspoken questions. Why had I come? What did I want? When would I leave, like everyone else did? I could feel those questions in his stare, even when he wasn't speaking. When the meal ended, he rose and said, "My assistant will show you around the estate. You'll have access to the east wing, the library, and the gardens. Stay out of the west wing." There it was again, that invisible line between us. "I understand," I said. He paused before leaving. "You don't have to pretend this marriage means anything. Keep up appearances when necessary, nothing more." I looked straight at him. "Don't worry. I didn't come here for a fairy tale." That made him stop at the doorway. For a brief second, his shoulders stiffened, as if something about my words bothered him. Then he left. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. Damian spent most of his time locked in his study, running cross enterprises from his home office. The staff barely spoke above a whisper, and when they did, it was always about him. He doesn't let anyone in. They say he hasn't smiled in years. I listened but didn't comment. Rumors were easy to spread when no one dared to ask the truth. Sometimes, when I passed his office, I could hear the low rumble of his voice during meetings, calm, precise, in control. He was everything people said he was: powerful, disciplined, intimidating. But he was also something else. Lonely. I noticed it in the small things. How he ate dinner alone in silence. How he never looked anyone directly in the eyes for too long. How his study light stayed on deep into the night. He was a man who lived surrounded by walls, built not from stone, but from hurt. It was on the 4th week that I saw his temper for the first time. I was walking through the main hall when I heard raised voices from the study. "Who authorized this shipment?" Damian's tone was sharp, like a blade against glass. A maid stood trembling near the door, clutching a stack of papers. "Yes, sir, it was the delivery company. That's not an excuse," he snapped. "You're responsible for what enters this house. If this happens again, you're fired." The girl's eyes filled with tears. She bowed and turned to leave, but I stepped forward before I could stop myself. Enough, I said. Damian turned, eyes narrowing. Excuse me? She made a mistake, not a crime, I said, my voice steady. If you keep treating people like they're disposable, don't be surprised when no one stays. The maid froze. The entire room did. For a long moment, he said nothing. His gaze locked on mine, sharp, unreadable, but burning. Then finally he exhaled slowly. You don't know how this house works, he said. Then teach me, I said simply. Don't teach fear. His jaw tightened. Then he waved the maid away. Leave us. She ran out, nearly crying with relief. Now we were alone. He stepped closer, voice low. You think you can walk in here and fix me? No, I said. But I don't plan to look away either. His eyes flicked to my ring, the one he'd placed there without a second glance. You stay because you pity me. No, I whispered. I stay because I choose to. Something in his expression changed. A flicker of confusion, almost pain. But before I could say more, he turned and walked out. That night, I couldn't sleep. The storm outside cracked against the windows, and I found myself wandering into the kitchen for water. To my surprise, he was there, leaning against the counter, a glass of whiskey in hand, the stormlight flashing across the scar on his neck. He looked tired, not just from work, but from life. I hesitated at the doorway. You don't sleep much, do you? He didn't look at me. I'm used to quiet. Quiet isn't the same as peace. That made him glance up. You talk too much for someone who says so little. Maybe I only talk when it matters. His gaze lingered on me for a moment longer, then dropped to his glass. You shouldn't get involved in things you don't understand. Then help me understand. His laugh was soft, bitter. You think the rumors scare you? Try living them. I stepped closer, the lightning outside flashing between us. Rumors only scare people who believe them. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us was thick, charged, like something was about to break. Then he turned away. Go to bed, Eli. I wanted to argue, but the way he said my name, low, rough, like he wasn't used to saying it, made me pause. Good night, Damian, I said quietly. He didn't answer, but I saw his reflection in the window. And for the first time, he wasn't frowning. The next morning, the maid I'd defended brought me breakfast with trembling hands. Thank you, sir, she whispered. He didn't fire me. I smiled. He shouldn't have. She hesitated. No one ever talks to him like that. But you did. And he listened. Listened. That word stuck with me. When I walked past his study later, the door was slightly open. He was inside on a call, his tone calmer than usual. For once, there wasn't that sharp edge to his words. Maybe it was just coincidence. Or maybe the ice was starting to crack. That evening, he joined me for dinner, unannounced, unexpected. He sat at the far end of the table, as always, and said nothing for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. I had the garden lights fixed. You mentioned they were flickering. I blinked. You remembered. He shrugged. I don't like inefficiency. Sure, I said, smiling faintly. Let's call it that. His lips twitched again. Not quite a smile, but something close. Maybe that was my victory for the day. Later that night, I stood at my window, watching the lights he'd ordered fixed glow softly in the dark garden. Everyone called him the ugly CEO. But the more I saw him, the less that name made sense. He wasn't ugly. He was wounded. And somehow, that made him more human than anyone I'd ever met. 2 months had passed since the quiet courthouse wedding that changed my name and rewrote my future. The papers were signed, the cameras dismissed, and life inside the Cross Mansion settled into a rhythm of silence. At first, Damian and I lived like polite strangers. He worked. I watched. But silence can teach you things words never do. It taught me that he hated bright lights, that he always straightened his cuff links before he spoke, and that every night, without fail, he checked that the windows in the East Hall were locked. It also taught me that beneath the stillness was control. The kind that didn't shout, only commanded. Sometimes I caught him studying me, when I poured tea, when I crossed the garden. His gaze never lingered long, yet it left the air charged, like the moment before lightning. We weren't warm. Not yet. But we weren't strangers anymore. A quiet morning. That morning I woke to find an envelope on the breakfast table. My family's seal. Dinner invitation, I murmured, sliding it open. My stomach twisted as I read the words. A celebration of the Hale, Cross Union. Damian looked up from his tablet. You're hesitating. They haven't hosted a dinner party anywhere in years, I said. It's not a dinner. It's a performance. His expression didn't change. Then we'll perform well. He said it so simply that it disarmed me. The drive to the Hales estate took an hour. The car hummed through rain-wet streets while I watched the world blur past. Damian sat beside me, silent but steady. His presence filled the small space, calm, immovable, almost protective. When I fidgeted with my sleeve, he spoke without looking up. "Don't shrink there," he said quietly. "They already took enough of your confidence." The words startled me. They weren't tender, but they were for me. The Hale mansion gleamed as if it had never known debt. My mother greeted us first, her smile stretched thin. My father's handshake trembled with guilt he would never admit. And then came Clarissa. She descended the stairs like a storm in silk. Perfect hair, perfect anger. Her eyes darted to Damian and froze. I saw the moment realization hit her. He wasn't the faceless monster she'd imagined. Even with the scar that traced his cheekbone, Damian looked powerful. Elegant. The kind of man who could silence a room simply by existing. Her painted smile faltered. "Mr. Cross," she said sweetly. "I've heard so much about you." "I'm sure you have," he answered, voice low. He didn't bow. He didn't offer his hand. And somehow, the entire room tilted toward him. Dinner was a theater of glances. My parents asked polite questions, Clarissa interrupted with sharper ones, and Damian responded with calm precision. Never cruel, just final. "So," Clarissa began, tracing the rim of her glass, "how does my brother find life as your spouse?" Her tone dripped honey. Her eyes dared me to break. Before I could answer, Damian set down his fork. The quiet sound was louder than any shout. "He's adjusting," Damian said evenly. "And succeeding. The staff at the mansion follow his lead now. He's earned my respect, something not easily given." The table went still. My father coughed, my mother stared. Clarissa blinked, color draining from her face. Possessive wasn't always rough. It could be protective, precise, deliberate. In that moment, he wasn't defending a deal. He was defending me. I found my voice. "Thank you," I said softly, meeting his eyes. His gaze flicked toward me, cool, unreadable. But his next words were for the whole room. "Anyone who thinks Eli is the lesser choice," he said, "doesn't understand value." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the candles seemed to bow lower. After the dinner, we left the estate. The night air felt lighter, almost electric. Inside the car, neither of us spoke for miles. Finally I whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he replied. "But I wanted to." He kept his eyes on the road, the city lights flashing across the scar on his cheek. "People underestimate you," he continued after a moment. "They mistake quiet for weakness. That's their first mistake." I looked out the window, hiding a smile I couldn't suppress. "And what's the second?" "Thinking I'd let them speak to you that way." It wasn't romantic. It was fierce. It was him. Later that night, back at the mansion, I poured 2 glasses of water, my hands still trembling from the evening. Damian accepted his glass and leaned against the counter, sleeves rolled to his forearms. "You handled them well." I exhaled a shaky laugh. "You scared them more than I did." "Good," he said simply. "Fear keeps their distance." "From you?" His gaze shifted to me, steady, unreadable. "From you." The air between us thickened. I could hear the tick of the kitchen clock, the faint hiss of rain outside. For the first time, I realized that the mansion didn't feel cold anymore. It felt alive. He looked down at the glass in his hand. "They'll talk again after tonight." "They always do." "I know." His eyes lifted to mine. "Let them. You're under my name now." The possessiveness in his tone wasn't about ownership. It was about protection, a promise unspoken. I nodded slowly. "I can protect myself too." "I know you can," he said. "But you don't have to alone." Something inside me eased then. Some part of me that had been braced for impact since the day of the wedding. Later, when he'd gone to his study, I sat by the window with my sketchbook. I tried to capture his profile from memory, the quiet command in his posture, the scar that caught the light like silver. He walked in unexpectedly, stopping behind me. "You draw?" I startled slightly. "Sometimes." He studied the sketch, expression unreadable. "You got the scar wrong." "I wasn't trying to hide it," I said. "I didn't say you should." When he turned to leave, his voice dropped low, almost a murmur. "You see things the way they are, not the way people say they are." I watched him go, heart beating too fast. Maybe he wasn't learning to love me yet, but he was learning to see me. And that, for now, was enough. The storm had been grumbling all evening, low thunder crawling over the hills. Most of the house was asleep, but I couldn't. The wind kept rattling the old shutters, whispering through the hall like something calling my name. It came from the east corridor. The one place Damian had told me never to enter. The storm had been grumbling all evening, low thunder crawling over the hills. Most of the house was asleep, but I couldn't. The wind kept rattling the old shutters, whispering through the hall like something calling my name. The East Wing. 2 months of living in this mansion, and I still didn't know why it was off limits. The staff never cleaned there. Damian never mentioned it. The few times I'd asked, he'd just said, "Stay out of there, Eli," in that deep, even tone that ended conversations. So I stayed out. Until tonight. The storm outside howled against the windows, rattling the old frames. The power had flickered twice already, plunging the house into dim candlelight. Damian was still at work, leaving me alone with my thoughts, and the echo of that creak. Curiosity won over obedience. I followed the sound down the hall. The air grew colder, heavier. Dust floated in thin shafts of lightning-lit air. The grand double doors at the end stood slightly ajar. I hesitated only a second before pushing them open. Inside, it was like stepping into another world. The walls were blackened, smoke-scarred. The once elegant curtains hung in tatters. In the middle of the room sat a burnt grand piano, its keys warped from heat. And against one wall, a family portrait half-eaten by fire. Damian was there, younger, smiling faintly beside a woman with sharp eyes. His father stood tall behind them. The woman's hand rested on Damian's shoulder, too tightly. I stepped closer, brushing ash from the frame. That's when I saw it. The faint outline of a small boy's room behind a broken door. And the journal. It lay on the floor, half-burned. The first few pages were still legible. He said, "I'm the heir now." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The tea tasted strange today. My stomach twisted. Then the air shifted. Someone was behind me. "What are you doing here?" His voice cracked like thunder itself. Damian stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, coat half unbuttoned, eyes blazing. I heard a noise," I said. "The door. I told you this part of the house is off limits," he barked, stepping forward. "Do you have any idea?" I backed into the piano. The sound it made was a brittle, broken note. For a second, he looked like he might shatter too. Then the anger in his face melted into horror. "Eli," his voice dropped. "I scared you." He ran a hand through his wet hair, breathing hard. I shouldn't have raised my voice. I'm sorry." "It's fine," I whispered, but my heart was still racing. "No," he said quietly. "It's not." He stared around the room as if seeing ghosts. His shoulders, always so straight, seemed to fold in. "What happened here?" I asked softly this time. He hesitated, then sank onto a half-burnt sofa, elbows on his knees. The candlelight caught the jagged scar along his cheek. "This wing was my mother's," he began. "When she died, my father remarried. He thought love would fix everything." His mouth twisted. It didn't. I stepped closer, but he didn't look up. "She wanted the company," he continued. "I was in the way. She started poisoning my tea, slowly, so it looked like illness. My father never noticed. Then one afternoon, she poured fuel along the hall and lit the match. He looked at his hands. They trembled once before he hid them. I woke up to smoke. Couldn't breathe. She locked the door from the outside." He laughed under his breath, a small, bitter sound. "Poison wasn't fast enough, I suppose." The rain outside beat harder against the windows. I swallowed. "How did you survive?" She miscalculated. She thought she had sent all the staff home. His eyes met mine at last. "But my tutor came back to return a book. He broke the window and dragged me out. By the time help came, the whole wing was gone." Silence filled the space between us. Then I said, "That's why you rebuilt it." He nodded. "To remind myself what betrayal costs." I didn't know what to say. So I crossed the room, stand in front of him, and touched the edge of the scar that had frightened so many. "It must have hurt," I whispered. "It did." His breath caught. "But it stopped a long time ago." We stayed like that, two people surrounded by the ruins of his past, until the thunder rolled farther away. When we finally left the East Wing, something between us had shifted. Damian didn't thank me, didn't smile, but his hand brushed mine as we walked, and he didn't pull away. The peace lasted 3 days. That morning the sun broke through the clouds, bright and deceptive. I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Messages. Notifications. A news headline flashing over and over again. Clarissa Voss speaks out. I was replaced by my own brother. Exclusive. The ugly CEO's secret marriage scandal. My sister's tear-streaked face filled the screen. She was spinning a story for every camera that would listen. How I'd stolen her fiancé. How our parents had been deceived. How Damian had been trapped. My hands went cold. She wouldn't, I said. But I knew deep down that she would. Footsteps echoed behind me. Damian stopped beside the table, eyes fixed on the headline. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he took the phone from my hand and set it down with deliberate calm. She's doing interviews, I said, voice shaking. People will think. He cut me off, low and sharp. Let them think what they want. His tone made everyone in the room go still. Then softer, he added, I'll handle it. But the company? Eli. I looked up. He stepped closer, the anger in his eyes burning not at me, but for me. You did nothing wrong, he said. You owe no one an explanation. He took off his jacket and placed it around my shoulders. The weight of it, the warmth, anchored me. She's rewriting the story, I whispered. They'll hate me. Then they'll hate me too. His jaw tightened. You didn't steal me, Eli. I chose you. The room fell silent except for the rain beginning again against the windows. For the first time since I'd met him, Damian reached out, brushing his thumb over my wrist. A fleeting, protective gesture. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, but inside, the storm between us had finally broken. Clarissa's interview had gone viral. He stole my fiancée. He lied to everyone. He pretended to be me just to trap Damian Cross. Her words echoed everywhere. On the news, in tabloids, in online gossip headlines, screaming the replacement spouse scandal. Every picture showed me. My face blurred beside headlines that burned. The comments were cruel, questioning if I'd seduced him for money, for fame. I'd never cared about either. But now, seeing my name dragged through the mud, I felt my throat tighten. Damian hadn't said a word since the news broke. He'd spent the morning on the phone with his board, his jaw clenched tight, his expression unreadable. Every so often, his eyes flicked to me, dark, stormy, protective. But he said nothing. Finally, after hours of silence, I couldn't take it anymore. Damian, maybe if I talked to the press. He turned sharply, voice like thunder. No. The word cracked through the air. I flinched, not because of fear, but because I heard something underneath it. Panic. He softened immediately, stepping closer. Eli, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to raise my voice. But you are not going out there. You did nothing wrong. This isn't your battle to fight. I swallowed hard. But it's about me. About us. He exhaled, rubbing his temples before looking back at me. Really looking. The man who once hid behind shadows now stood in the open, his eyes raw with emotion. Then let me fight for you. Just this once, let me protect what's mine. Something in my chest broke at those words. The same man who used to live behind locked doors now wanted the world to see him. For me. The next morning, Cross Tower was surrounded by reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones waved, and for the first time in years, Damian Cross walked through the lobby without his mask. The crowd gasped. The so-called ugly CEO wasn't ugly at all, just human. A thin scar curved across his left cheek, the only reminder of the fire his stepmother started. But it did nothing to hide his sharp jawline, the steady power in his stance, or the quiet storm in his eyes. He wore a black suit like armor, his hand tight around mine as he led me to the podium. Don't let go, he murmured under his breath. I won't, I whispered back. The cameras exploded in light as he faced them. His voice carried, calm but commanding. There's been enough lies. My marriage was never forced. The contract between our families named a partner, not a gender, not a pawn. Eli stepped forward when others walked away. He didn't trap me, he saved me. A murmur rippled through the press. Damian continued, his voice lower now, personal. I was content to hide from the world. Then he walked into my life and reminded me that scars don't make you unworthy of love. They make you real. I froze, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. He wasn't reading from a script. Every word came straight from him. From the same man who once couldn't even meet his own reflection. So if anyone wants to call him a thief, he said, gaze cutting into the cameras, then know this, he stole nothing. I gave him everything willingly. My name, my company, my heart. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks. The room fell silent for a heartbeat, and then reporters started shouting questions. But Damian ignored them. He turned toward me instead, one hand rising to cup my cheek. The world watched. You didn't steal me, he said softly, the words only for me. I chose you. The noise around us faded. For a moment, it felt like the whole city held its breath. Then he leaned in and kissed me. Firm, sure, and public. The kiss wasn't desperate. It was a declaration. The kind that said, you are mine, and I will never hide again. When we pulled apart, I caught sight of my parents, and Clarissa, my mother's eyes were wide with disbelief. Clarissa's lips trembled, for once speechless. Later, when we were alone in the car, I turned to Damian. You didn't have to do that. He smirked faintly, eyes soft. You think I did it for them? No. I did it so you'd stop doubting what you mean to me. I couldn't help it. I laughed through the tears. You really don't care about your reputation, do you? He shrugged. Reputation is for people who still need to prove something. I already have what I want. He reached across the seat, taking my hand in his. Not just to hold it, but to anchor me. You said once you'd make me see you, Eli. Well, I do. And I'm never looking away again. Outside, the city lights blurred past the windows, bright, endless, alive. For the first time, I didn't feel like someone's replacement. I felt chosen. I felt home. 3 months later, the world had finally stopped whispering our names. But Damian Cross wasn't a man who did silence. I found him on the balcony that morning, his black shirt half unbuttoned, sleeves rolled to his forearms, sunlight painting gold across the faint scar on his cheek. He looked at peace, dangerous, beautiful mine. Morning, I said softly, holding my mug. He turned, eyes sweeping over me the way they always did, like he was memorizing. Morning, husband. I smiled. The word husband still sent a warmth through me every single time. I thought he'd go back to reading his file, but instead he closed it, leaned back in his chair, and said casually, I want to redo our wedding. I blinked. What? He looked far too calm for someone dropping that kind of sentence. The first time was rushed. Hidden. Paper and signatures. He stood, walking toward me, every step slow, deliberate. This time, I want the world to see. My heartbeat stuttered. You mean? With the media. Cameras. I want them to watch me put a ring on you properly. His hand brushed my jaw, thumb tracing my cheekbone. They called you a replacement once. I want them to see you as what you are, my equal. My choice. I swallowed, emotions tangling in my throat. You don't have to prove anything, Damian. He smiled faintly, but there was steel in his eyes. I'm not proving anything. I'm claiming it, claiming you. And when Damian Cross claimed something, the world listened. 2 weeks later, the Cross estate bloomed with red roses and gold lights. Reporters filled the outer courtyard, and a sea of lenses caught the moment he turned toward me at the altar. No shadows this time, no mask, no fear. Just him. And me. When the priest asked if he took me as his husband, Damian didn't even hesitate. I already did, he said, voice steady and proud. Now I'm just saying it loud enough for the world to hear. The applause roared. Cameras flashed. But all I saw was him. The man who'd once hidden behind scars, now standing unshaken in the light, holding my hand like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. And as he leaned in to kiss me, with the world watching, I realized something simple and final. He wasn't the monster they said he was. And I was never the replacement. We were both survivors, who found home in each other.